Uh,
Perfect.
and
Okay.
it didn't break anything.
Not this time.
There we go. Thanks for having the conversation.
Yes.
You know, I obviously have been, I think you connected with me last week, but obviously seeing lots of stuff coming out this week. And, our, the statement we put out last night, the town hall, the conversations I'm having absolutely are not putting like a cap on this.
Mhm.
It's about really thinking about how we can use this movement to like actually create some change, and
Yeah.
be, as market leaders, lead this space to, a place that is more equitable and more fair. And so would love to talk about, some of your suggestions
Absolutely.
and answer any questions about what's been happening or how we operate. But yeah.
Okay.
Anything?
Great.
So I don't know if we want to start by going through some of the suggestions in the email, or if you just want to fire off questions, whatever works for you.
Yeah. So I guess I would start with saying, I, I've been keeping up with everything as far as the campaign to open for, and saw your statement last night. And I know there's a town hall tomorrow. And I appreciate that these conversations are being recorded and that they are going to be published. I guess my first thing would be what I'm noticing from companies far and wide is that we're starting to have these conversations about inclusion. And those are important conversations. But at the same time, one of the things that I think we quite often miss, and I come from a higher education counseling background, is that inclusion actually is still sitting for white supremacy, because it's saying we're including you in our thing, and the reality is it wasn't really yours to begin with. It was all of ours. You just somehow separated us out of it. So I guess I want to start by saying that as you are a market leader and you're supposed to be a leader, keep that in mind as you're coming up with new tactics, because when we talk about equity and inclusion, it in some ways we still are like, oh, well, we brought like 5 of you to the table, so like we did it. But the reality is it's not about how many people from a marginalized group can you bring to your table. It's the fact that you shouldn't even need to like do the counting, really. And I know that you came out with your statement last night talking a little bit about who has seen the $9 million previously and their racial backgrounds, as well as in another statement talking about the background of your own employees. And so I think, those stats are important, but they don't always tell the full story. And so, and stats are something that are thrown around, especially in America, willy-nilly. And again, coming from a research background, I'm always interested to know more about the data. So if we could talk about that, that would actually be great, because I understand the general sentiment of that, but.
And I'll say a few things. One, I think, like in our first statement, maybe last week, I think I said that, the reason I wanted to have these conversations was, that too often, diverse voices are denied their owed seat at the table. It's not about, to your point, it's not about me saying, I created a spot for you that didn't exist. The spot was always there. It's just that like, generally companies, people, even haven't filled it, right? And so like totally aligned there, and it's not about this idea of inclusion. And when we talk to our clients about diversity, it's not about diversity. It's not about like, ooh, you need to check this box because like, or else, this could you could get backlash. It works. It's just like, this just works better. This is just good business. We're marketing to America. Let's have a campaign that looks like America.
Right.
Not a campaign that looks like your graduating class from, your Alabama high school and, in the suburbs.
Right.
And so like, that's, we're totally aligned on that. And I also know that like language is so important. And even language that is used in the best intention, like inclusion, plays into that like white supremacy foundation of how the whole world has been, at least America has been built. So totally aligned there. Let's talk stats. Those stats are quick and dirty, first of all, because like it's tough to go like one ethnicity on 4 is an optional thing that you can put in, right? And so what we did is we looked at the last $9 million that we've paid out. It's a little under, I think, a year of the last payouts. And we then went through, took the people who have self-identified for the like ended up being like $8.9 million. I think in total we looked at about 9.1 million. So it was about 200,000 of payouts that we couldn't identify, like that influencer didn't self-identify. Now, we said in the post, this is not the full story, because the more interesting story is, well, what are the CPMs that those influencers are getting? Because if we paid twice as many Black influencers, to get to the number of 27 or 28%, whatever it was, then that's not really equitable or fair. That analysis taking a little bit longer, which is why we said the town hall for Wednesday, because it's just like, it's thousands and thousands of data points and a good amount of content.
Absolutely.
But we're going through that. But that's kind of where we're at. But any other questions on that data?
No, I think I'll just have to tune into the town hall to see, what you're able to find out as you're going through all of those samples. I think that I would just add, and I believe with this being a transparent recording, this will be done. But one of the last lines in my email, when you ask Black folks, and it's most likely going to be a lot of Black women that are responding to you, send me your concerns, let's talk about it. That is emotional labor. And I think that one of the other things we're consistently seeing from companies is tell us how to do this. And I think in general from white people and non-Black people of color is, well, tell me how I'm supposed to do this. But the reality is we've already written a lot of books. We've already, produced a lot of other types of art to tell you how. Go frickin' find it. So I think just be cognizant of the fact when you're having these conversations that, that each of us has taken the time to take a little bit of ourselves to give it to you in the hopes that this is creating a better place for us as creators. And that also has to be recognized. And if there are going to be any initiatives that come out of these conversations that 4 ends up using, that you need to make sure that those folks are getting the credit that they deserve for giving you those ideas, because they're not your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we're also, even in the last week, been working with a few, leaders in the Black influencer space, and like also making sure if I'm taking a decent amount of someone's time, that we're compensating for that, and that they're paying them their hourly consulting rate. Because it's not their job to tell me how to run my company or fix my company or fix this industry. But I do really value that insight. And I think what I said in my first statement was that like, I understood that like, it's not fair to ask for help. Right. But I just didn't feel that I had the authenticity or experience to like, I want to be a champion for these solutions. I want to be a part of coming up with them because I do have ideas. But I don't want to be the only one coming up with them, and if my company had more diverse voices at the table, like we, hope it will soon, I think we could step back and as a company put that statement out, but I just didn't feel right without inviting those voices. But it was a back and forth, because not only am I asking for that advice, guidance, conversations, but I'm doing it in what is probably one of the more traumatic periods in a lot of people's lives, and so also just want to say again, I appreciate you taking this time, especially in light of, you know, some of the stuff that's come out this week, that you're kind of putting yourself out here and having the conversation. So
yeah.
absolutely.
And I mean, I won't lie to you. I did think about canceling the call because I was worried that, you know, we'd have this conversation, there would be no record of this conversation happening, and either you would take something out of this and that would be pushed into the company, and it's like, wow, I helped them get there and there's no credit or compensation, or that essentially I would be talking to a wall. And I don't mean that to sound disrespectful, but I think that one of the things that is truly traumatizing, is that, you know, this is really new for a lot of people, right? Racism has always existed in America. That's the foundation this country was built on, but it being so much at the forefront of your mind, that's new for a lot of white people. That's new even for some non-Black people of color. But the reality is I've been experiencing racism my entire life. And so this isn't new. And so it's traumatizing in some ways to have to keep explaining things and, you know, starting over. And it's like, oh, this must be really hard for you right now. It's always been hard. Y'all are just finally paying attention. And I think what comes with that is listening. You know, like I said, I'm completing my master's in counseling. And one of the most important skills that I have learned is listening. And quite often, especially when you're trying to save your butt because your company is you, folks are not actively listening. Mm-hmm. And to be an active listener, it takes less about the response that you give after somebody gives you information and more about not trying to come up with a response as they're speaking. Because if you're trying to come up with a response as they're speaking, you're not actually paying attention. And the reason we've gotten this far and it's taken this long is because people weren't paying attention to us. So I guess I would just say I implore you to take some time to make sure that you're working on that skill, because that is a skill. And not only you as the head of your company, but making sure that the rest of your folks are learning and understanding that skill, because you could really transform who you are as a person, but if the people under you are not also doing the work, it doesn't mean anything, unfortunately. And everybody has implicit bias of some sort. So I guess I would ask, are you instituting any type of trainings for that, for your staff? Any other type of professional development?
Great question. I think, like, you know, one of the things of running a company, this is my first company I've ever run. And, you know, I'm no spring chicken, but I'm not like an old geese yet. I'm just 36. But it's a young company, you know, it's a young company that is trying to do something totally new. You know, we were the first influencer marketing platform in the world. And I think there are times where I definitely realize, oh, wow, the staff is so young, you know, and we need to do more. I don't know if you saw the video I did with my old professor, Dr. Daves. So he's doing he's doing some bias and training with the team from a very his, you know, he's an academic. It's he's not the normal diversity and inclusion kind of counselor that comes in to train people, but I found personally, you know, the ability to understand the history and the kind of more intellectual side of what is going on and what the reality of America is was so important to learn. Not, hey, here are some words to avoid that are triggering, and here are some words that are okay. Instead, to say, can I help you, as he says, see yourself from another point of view, see the two Americas, you know? Yeah. And if you can see that, then you should understand how to act accordingly. So he's coming in, and we're doing that training with everyone over the next, starting in the next week or so, and going on for, you know, the next couple of months. You know, as you were talking, I thought, well, shit, okay, someone is doing their master's in counseling and with a thought on listening. listening as a skill
Mm-hmm.
is interesting. You probably know a lot about that maybe there could be an opportunity to do some training on, I don't like what is empathetic listening. Like, how do you, it's a skill, but
Mm-hmm.
look, I've had to have conversations with people on my team about like, hey, could you stop cutting everyone off? Like, I know you're trying to like get that word in.
Mm-hmm.
And in corporate America, that's like, it is about formulating your response while someone's
Right.
talking, right? So I would love to talk about, if you're open to it,
Mm-hmm.
having you come in and do some sessions on how we can be better listeners, because I feel it's a skill, but one that most people don't take the time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And if they wanted to learn how to do it better, wouldn't necessarily know how to start. Kids
Mm-hmm.
these days, they're not out there reading books.
Right.
Uh, so
Yes.
I would be interested, and we can talk about that
Yeah.
after, if you're interested in you coming in and doing that. I know you're super busy with school, but if you have some bandwidth,
Sure.
that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, not until being in my counseling program, really understood that listening was a skill. So I understand where you're coming from, and obviously having to go through therapeutic practices have been able to improve that skill, really define it. So I would definitely be open to discussing that.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And another thing on listening that I think is a failure point for me in the past is that, like, I really, consider myself to be a decent listener, and like very open to criticism and
Mm-hmm.
to having these conversations, and not having these kinds of conversations to, again, to like quell it and make it quiet, but like, I get excited when I find a problem in the company, because it means we get to fix it and get better. And the same with myself, right? When I find a flaw and I can fix it, I get excited. I think that where I have lost some like authenticity, especially in the Black community, is that I've had a lot of these conversations.
Right.
They haven't always translated into follow through.
Right. And
They've
that action.
translated, or they've translated into marginal gains.
Mm-hmm.
Little steps over time. And we gave ourselves excuses for it. Oh, we're busy. We're doing this. There's this going on,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, having these open conversations, having them be recorded, publishing them, creating an advisory board that we're accountable to, publishing our data monthly, like all these things. Because for me, it's like, I want to make sure this continues to be a conversation over months and years, right? That like, don't let, Trump start a war with China and everyone starts talking about that, and we all say, oh, okay, we don't have to focus on this anymore.
Right. Yeah, this is lifelong learning. And I think that that's causing a lot of burnout for folks, because they're like, I have to keep having these conversations all the time. Like, it was exhausting listening to you have these conversations 6 months ago, or 8 years ago, when the Black Lives Matter movement really started to get hot. And they're like, I have to keep talking about this and talking to my children about this that are under 5. Yes, because it is a history of our country, and so we have to talk about it if we don't want to repeat it. That's the point of learning history. So yeah, it's trying time.
Yeah, it is. And I think I think the world is.
Sorry, I'm throwing dog treats so that my dog goes away.
What's happening here?
Just throwing dog treats.
Or you just do that like every time you make a good point. You're just like, what the heck was I just saying? What were we just talking about before we were laughing?
The fact that this is all traumatic and crazy, and that we'll have to continue to have these conversations forever.
Yes. Yes. Gosh. I don't remember my point I was going to say, but where is it? I don't know. We've been thinking about this, about transparency, right? And we've published those numbers. We've got more numbers. Right. We're pulling a lot more together. Mm-hmm. Some that, I think we're proud of and look good. Some that don't. and that we're going to be transparent on. Data only works if it's honest.
Right.
And my commitment is that it will be. And if somebody wanted to come in and do a peered third-party review of it, if they didn't believe it, I'm open to that as well.
Okay.
But it's like, what does that look like going forward? We thought about a kind of dashboard that's always existing that shows not just where our payouts are going, but what the average CPMs are. Also, like what the payouts are for influencers of specific following numbers. Because I think some of the problem is that, I will sometimes have a meeting with an influencer who has 100,000 followers. I'm like, what are you charging for a post? And they're like, $200. And I'm like, what?
Why?
Why? They're like, I don't know. I don't have any friends that do this. That's just what.
Right.
Should I charge more? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. And so we're thinking like, some of the ways that we sent out offers in the past, they're obviously making people feel undervalued, which is like, I hate that, right? You can't start a partnership by making someone feel shitty about the amount of money you're offering them, right? So that is a problem we need to solve. And one way to solve it is changing the way we calculate our offers, which we're currently doing, the way we design those offer pages, which we're doing, removing the language that makes it feel like it's a final offer that can't be negotiated, which we're doing. So all those things are happening. But another side is making sure people are educated on what is fair, because on both sides it's true, right? If you have 100,000 followers, I'd say fair to charge between $800 and, a $15 to $1,600 on the high side for an Instagram post. Right. Is like my back of the napkin. So that's fair, I would say. 4,000 for a post is not fair unless, there's some extraordinary different talent you have. You're an illustrator or something like that. Yeah, but 200 is not fair. And I think we need to I think, what do you think about that idea of a kind of like dashboard that is also helping to educate so that new influencers coming into the space would be able to look at it and say like, oh, okay, that's about where I should be. That's what fair looks like.
Yeah, so that's a great segue because I think I started to bring up this point in my email. And so here in Chicago, we have a company called Clickish. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Taylor Barrington is a fabulous woman who she's a Black woman, and she is in a larger body. And so, obviously she's consistently marginalized and undervalued because of those things, but she's a freaking rock star, and educating is really, really important to her. And their firm is similar in some ways to your own. And what I have gained from just being a part of their membership club, which is $7 a month. So, they try to make it as affordable as possible for anyone, is that education piece. Because when I got my first offer, back when I was at like 1,000 followers to do a blog post and an Instagram post and 2 stories, I had no freaking clue what I should charge the company. I saw they were working with people that had 10K followers then. So I'm like, well, I'm not as important as them, even though at that time I had a 10% engagement rate. So like,
that's good.
All those things matter. And without that education piece, you don't know. And so if that's where you start, then you're continuously undervaluing yourself every single time. And I think it would be important to have that education piece. Like if you really want to be a leader in this industry, you have to make sure that as a ambassador marketing firm, you're educating your ambassadors, because if they don't know what to ask for, then you're like starting from zero pretty much.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think it's an idea that's been kicking around. And I think one that we need to pursue. It'd take a little while to code it up and build it and everything. And I'd love to get, what I'd love to do is start to also pull competitors in and have that data be anonymized and pulled into a central place so that we can actually understand industry benchmarks, right? 30% of our last $9 million went to Black influencers. Is that good or bad? Is that better than the industry or worse than the industry? What is the market rate for 100,000 followers for an Instagram post? pricing is complex and there's a nuance to it, and it is very hard to just say like, here's what it is. You know, even the discrepancy that was mentioned in Valerie's post, those influencers did not have the same following. You know, one influencer had a you know, quite a bit larger following, and you know, there's just like, there's nuance to that, you know. But we have to get to a place, I think, where individuals understand what is fair, and that doesn't allow companies to take advantage of them, because we really did. I started this company because I saw how transformative access to opportunity can be, you know, that like, if you give people that generally don't have access to those opportunities opportunity, it can change their lives. And I wanted people to be able to quit their jobs and do what they love, you know. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways we've done that. In a lot of ways we've fallen short. And so I really appreciate the conversation. I'm sorry if I ran a little, I was a little late.
No,
and
I was gonna say,
but I would also, I know I could talk, I feel like we could have talked for 2 hours. And I would love to talk more about what I'm going to follow up on some listening training, because I think such an important thing. And honestly, just outside of what's happening with race in America, just is, I think being a good listener is like a superpower. In general, that just helps you in life. And I'd like to keep talking about any ideas you have for solutions. I love, you know, I love that kind of transparent dashboard. I'd love to, I don't want to like, you know, share any of is it Clickish? I don't want to like steal any of their thunder, but if there's data points that you think are really helpful from those dashboards that really were enlightening to you, then I'd love to know what those are, because we could start to pull some of that together. And if you have time, you know, we're doing that town hall tomorrow. I'm going to be presenting a lot more data, as well as, you know, our commitments, and then opening it up, you know, to whoever has questions. So I hope you can be there.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
This will be published in the next hour or so.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Bye.